5 stars, but this team at Duke, you can't tell me that this team that they got coming in this year is anywhere close to Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett, and then the year before. So I think it's wide open. Virginia's really going to be good again. They're so well coached. They have under the radar guys. Florida State's always got talent. So it'll be another kind of wide open year with 20 ACC games. That's going to be a grind, and it really depends. It doesn't depend as much because they used to have, I think, 5 opponents that they played on the road and 5 opponents that they played at home only in single games. And if you get like Carolina got a big break last year because the 5 games that they played on the road were against the weakest teams in the ACC. The 5 games they played at home were against the best teams in the ACC. So I haven't really studied it and looked at the schedule this year to see how that falls. But when you get into January, every game is an ACC game. I don't think maybe Duke is the only team that I've seen plays a non-conference game. They always play that game against St. John's. But maybe not, because Duke is also the only team that doesn't start in November or December. So I have to look that far down the schedule.
I was going to ask you.
Carolina's going to. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you. You mentioned the 20 ACC games. Are you a fan of Carolina playing an ACC game to start the season? They play one in December. They go to Virginia. Are you a fan of that, or I know you're a traditionalist ACC guy, so you'd much rather it be in January only, correct?
Yeah, really, but I mean, I understand why coaches take what Vitale used to call the cupcakes. They want to build some confidence in their team, and they want to build some wins on their resume. But I don't think 20 games is going to matter that much. It's going to be a little bit more of a grind in January. I mean, as you said, Carolina has, is it 2 that they have before January? They play Virginia. They play Virginia in December and Notre Dame in November. So for them, after January is going to be pretty much when it's been 18 games in the past. I don't really see. I'm not looking at Duke's schedule, but Duke doesn't play an ACC game until January. So how are they going to get their 20 games in when Carolina, starting January 4th against Georgia Tech, and I'm looking down the list here, they don't play a non-conference game. So how is Duke going to get 20 games in January and February and March when this looks like there's only room for 18? So that's a pretty good question. And they don't get to play the ACC. I mean, they open against Kansas on national TV, so you can talk about that. But they don't get to play an ACC game until they play 2 months of basketball, which is an advantage for them. And they're the only one that gets it because they're the 15. There's 15 teams, and the other 14 play each other. They all play games in November and December. So. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and with Carolina, they have got to get some resume builders early in the year because they're not going to be that good. And if you look at who they play, Notre Dame's in the second division of the ACC, and they're playing at home, so they should win that. They go to UNC Wilmington, they have Gardner-Webb, they have Elon, and then they go out to the Bahamas and play Alabama and maybe Iowa State and Michigan and maybe Gonzaga, which is on their schedule for December 18th. So it gets tougher in December with Ohio State at Virginia and Gonzaga, but they need some early wins to get some confidence and get the record the way it should be. And then you'll have to see. I mean, Roy Williams doesn't take a Christian Keeling or a Justin Pierce unless he knows something about those guys. 1 year in the program, 4 years somewhere else. That's something that's very unlikely for Carolina. He did it with Cameron Johnson, but Cameron had 2 years, remember, coming in. So he had time to really integrate into the program. And I know he was injured his first year, but he was so much better his second year than he was his first year. So we'll see what these guys all played for coaches that Roy knows and are familiar with, and so he loves them as kids. But again, both of them are stepping it up to a level of basketball that they haven't played before. So we'll have to see. I mean, Pierce is supposedly a great outside shooter, and people have said they've seen practices where he didn't miss and other practices where he didn't make one. So he could be a streak shooter. And then Bacot is to me, is a big question because he's a 5-star. But is he really a 5-star? Is he one who can play significant minutes, stay out of foul trouble? Because if he gets into foul trouble and Manley doesn't play much, then they're looking at a small lineup. They're looking at Pierce at the power forward, and rebounding has always been so important to Roy, and that I think Bacot is a big key, and he's the second most ballyhooed recruit on the team, and so we'll see how he does when the rubber meets the road.
It would be a disservice to not ask you about Duke Carolina while you're on here. The rivalry is always intense, but has the rivalry changed with Duke going to the one and done method of recruiting, and even Carolina, as we're starting to dip into it ourselves? Because in the 80s and 90s, they were 4-year guys that they literally grew to hate each other during games. Now these guys, they play AAU games together, they're best friends or whatever. So how has the rivalry changed in the modern era of college basketball?
Well, that's a great point, Josh, because I wrote 2 books on the Duke Carolina rivalry, Blue Blood, which came out in 2005, and that was the history of the rivalry to the ACC years, all the way through 2005 when Carolina won the national championship. And it was a huge seller because it covered the ACC when it was just like you said. Everybody was there for 4 years and 3 years when they had freshman teams. Even when they had freshman teams in the old days, you had highly recruited recruits like Dick DeVenzio and Dennis Weiser playing freshman games at packed Carmichael Auditorium and the old Duke Indoor Stadium. And yes, the players, the rivalry grew within those groups of players every year, and they really did hate each other. And there was nothing more vitriolic that I remember. 1980s, late 80s, so the 1989 ACC championship game at the old Omni when Duke had Danny Ferry and Leitner and Quinn Snyder and Henderson and those guys in Carolina had Reed, Bucknall, and Lebo, and those, there were times over the years where the players did like each other and they knew each other, and before Duke downtown was rebuilt, the Duke players used to come and party in Chapel Hill. But in the 80s, it really grew into hatred. And so the second book that I wrote came out this year, was Blue Blood 2, and it covered the last 13 years of the rivalry, and it's just like what you said. The rivalry is, it's calmer. The one thing is that you've got 2 Hall of Fame coaches, Coach K and Roy, who they both won multiple national championships. They both won lots of games. They don't have anything to prove, and I wouldn't say they like each other. I think they do kind of like each other. And Roy got to know Kay away from the rivalry when he was in Kansas, so you get that element. And so Dean and Kay used to scream at each other during games, and that was a hot rivalry. But it was Kay 16 years younger and trying to make his bones against the Dean, and we don't have that now. So that's one aspect of it. The other is that, yes, you have these one-and-done kids who they come in and they say, we love Duke, we hate Carolina, we love Carolina, we hate Duke. But do they really? They're not going to get 4 years of it. And what's on their mind? Their mind is really to have as great 1 year as they can have the big exposure that the Duke rivalry gives them, and then go on to the NBA. That's what they're thinking about. I mean, at the end of the season, for the last 2 years, when Duke comes down to the last possession to get to the Final Four and didn't both times, I mean, what's the downside for those guys? They're going, oh, we lost, but tomorrow I'm a millionaire, So, when you've got a whole different chemistry working among the players. So, at the end, I would say that it's a kinder and gentler rivalry. I mean, the game's still great. And somebody like Grayson Allen, who was a 4-year player who came in, I mean, he was doing all kinds of shenanigans, and he became the most recent hated Duke player. But Hansbrough was like that when he was played for 4 years, and he ended up with Henderson breaking his nose. So, that was the last bastion, I think, of that kind of rivalry when that happened. So it's still the basketball. It's still the number one games on national TV. It's really the only games that the two Duke Carolina games during the regular season are the only games that mean anything to anybody during the regular season anymore. Everybody else is trying to win enough games and get an RPI or whatever they call it these days and jockey for an NCAA seeding. And that's what's really more important. And fans don't get into it really as much. Some of the fanatics do, the hardcores do, but the fans don't as much because they don't know the players that well. They don't know the players on the other team that well. They don't know the players on the Carolina team. They haven't grown, into being family members. And I think Roy will always remember that. I think his chemistry, his formula for this will always be a base of players who stay at least 3, maybe 4 years, the foundation of the program that Dean Smith used to have. And, Dean had a lot of guys who left after their second and third years, like Stackhouse and Wallace, and then back to Jordan and Worthy. But he always had the core program underneath it. And I think Roy will always keep that going. Will he ever turn down a 5-star, a one and done like Cole Anthony if he wants to come? No. And I think Cole Anthony, I'm really glad that Hubert Davis, the assistant coach in Carolina, got the credit when Cole Anthony went on ESPN to announce he was going to Carolina. He, his mother, and his father all said that it was a relationship with Hubert Davis that first got Cole close to the program. And you remember Greg Anthony played with Hubert with the Knicks for 3 years, and that was something that I missed, and a lot of people missed it. Why was Cole so high on the Carolina recruiting list? And right from the start, and it was Hubert Davis. So I think that was an important thing for the program to follow up the Kobe White with Cole Anthony. And we'll see. I think you follow it better than I do, but they got a pretty good 5-star coming in next year at point guard, don't they? Yeah.
They did a pretty good job going into 2020. They got 5. They got 5 or 3 5-stars and a 4-star in the 2020 class so far, and they're not done yet. All right. Yeah. So before I let you go, what are you working on? Where can readers go find your work?
Well, I write for a local radio station website called chapelboro.com, and so I write long form and short form commentary every day. That's in written form and also with an audio link as well. So that's Chapelboro, like Chapel, and then Carborough.com. And it's, years ago it would have been like a little old local website, but now, because of social media and because of all the interest in Carolina and Chapel Hill, people who don't necessarily live here anymore but still follow everything that goes on here, it's become very, very popular. And, as well as I do, that the newspaper business is completely changed, and there aren't that many local newspapers anymore. The big dogs are struggling. So, internet and social media and everything has found its place. So you don't know. Everybody has a voice on social media, and everybody's a blogger these days. So you have to decide who are the guys who really know what they're talking about, or who are the guys that are just yelling the loudest. So that's a decision for the readers to make. But the book that I always like to promote is the one I did in 2016 called Game Changers. It's the story of the civil rights era in Chapel Hill in the 1960s when 2 very courageous young men, Dean Smith in his 30s and Charlie Scott, who was an 18-year-old freshman, broke the color barrier at Carolina. Scott became the first African-American scholarship athlete at Carolina, and he paved the way for, the Bill Chamberlains, the Walter Davises, the Phil Fords, and everybody. And I say why that's important, because Duke had a black player named C.B. Claiborne, and he actually told Charlie on Charlie's recruiting visit not to come here because this place isn't good for us. And it wasn't at that time. And it took Duke 10 years to get its next big-time black player, Gene Banks, in 1976.